It began on a night that seemed as ordinary as any other, until a single, misleading ping on my phone shattered the illusion of our perfect life. I never imagined that the digital trail of a wife's location could reveal such a devastating secret. In those first 100 heart-stopping words, I learned that my wife had lied about where she was, that the carefully crafted story was nothing more than a mask hiding a betrayal I could hardly fathom. The cold, relentless beep of a location alert turned into a siren call for truth, and before I knew it, I was embarking on a journey that would forever redefine my world. I had always believed our marriage was built on trust. For over 8 years, my wife, Sarah, and I had woven a tapestry of shared routines and quiet confidences, a life where every missed dinner or late return was easily explained away by the everyday pressures of work and social commitments. Our friends admired our solid union, and my family always said we were the perfect couple. I took comfort in the mundane. I never imagined that behind her gentle smiles lay secrets waiting to be uncovered. It started with a small inconsistency. One afternoon, while we were out for a walk in the park, a routine we cherished, Sarah mentioned she had to finish an errand. Something in her tone struck me as off, but I brushed it aside as mere fatigue. Later that evening, as I returned home, I casually checked my phone. A notification popped up from a location-based app that I had forgotten Sarah had installed. Curiosity pricked at me as I saw an unfamiliar location tag, the Marlowe Hotel, downtown. I recalled no conversation about any hotel stay, and the very idea seemed incongruent with the life we led. At first, I rationalized it away, perhaps she had made a mistake, or maybe it was a glitch. But a gnawing suspicion took root. I decided to cross-check the location history on her phone with the timeline of our day. What I discovered made my blood run cold, a series of pings from that same hotel at times when she claimed to be elsewhere. My heart pounded as I realized that the story I had been told was not the truth. For several days, I wrestled with a turmoil of emotions: disbelief, anger, sorrow, and an overwhelming need for answers. I tried to maintain my composure, interacting with Sarah as if nothing were amiss, all the while silently logging every anomaly. I discreetly examined her phone when she was away, always careful not to raise suspicion, and noted every detail: the exact times the location was recorded, the duration of her visits, even the names of nearby establishments that popped up on the map. Every piece of data painted a picture of deception so meticulous that I couldn't ignore it. Late one night, unable to sleep with the relentless whisper of suspicion in my ear, I made a decision. I would track her phone, not out of a desire to spy for mere curiosity, but to find irrefutable evidence that would force the truth into the open. I downloaded a discreet tracking app on my own device, syncing it quietly with hers, and began to watch the digital breadcrumbs of her movements. Every time the app pinged an unfamiliar location, my heart sank further. I documented everything with a mix of dread and grim determination. The app's notifications grew increasingly alarming. There were evenings when she supposedly spent her time at work or at home, yet the tracker showed her driving toward a part of the city I didn't recognize, an upscale district known for its lavish hotels and clandestine meeting spots. My pulse raced as I traced her route, each mile a cruel reminder that the woman I loved was not where she said she would be. One humid Friday night, as I sat alone in our darkened living room with only the soft hum of the ceiling fan for company, I reached a decision that would irrevocably alter my life. I grabbed my coat and keys, my mind set on following the trail. I told myself it was just one night of investigation, a temporary step to uncover the truth. With the tracking app guiding my every turn, I followed the route indicated on the map until I arrived at the imposing facade of a luxury hotel downtown. I parked discreetly, my hands trembling as I took a moment to steady my racing heart. The hotel's lobby was elegant and quiet, a stark contrast to the tumult of emotions churning within me. I approached the concierge under the pretense of asking about local events, all the while glancing at the security cameras. Every step I took felt like a descent into a hidden world, a world that I had never imagined existed within our life. Before I could gather my thoughts, my phone buzzed with an alert: Sarah's location had changed again. This time, it confirmed that she was inside the hotel. My mind raced: had she gone there alone? Was this a chance meeting, or was it part of a clandestine rendezvous? The uncertainty was unbearable. I felt as if the air around me had thickened with the weight of impending revelation. I waited in the lobby, my eyes scanning the entrance for any sign of her. The minutes ticked by agonizingly slowly, each one stretching my nerves to the breaking point. Finally, I saw her, a flash of familiar features, a moment of hesitation in her step as she entered the elevator. My heart sank further, and without thinking, I followed her discreetly. The elevator ride felt interminable. Every floor that passed was a cruel reminder that the truth was so close yet so far away. When the doors finally opened, I stepped into a corridor that exuded an air of secrecy and sophistication. I moved quietly, my footsteps muffled by thick carpet, until I reached a door marked with an unassuming number. My heart hammered in my chest as I approached, my mind a tumult of dread and determination. With a deep, shaky breath, I knocked softly on the door. The sound echoed briefly before the door swung open, revealing a scene that would forever etch itself into my memory. There, in the dim light of a luxurious hotel room, was Sarah, engaged in a tender, intimate embrace with a man I did not recognize. Time seemed to freeze as I stood in the doorway, my world shattering into 1,000 irreparable pieces. I froze, the cold reality of betrayal washing over me like a tidal wave. The room was filled with soft whispers, the sound of hushed laughter, and the unmistakable warmth of intimacy, details that were both beautiful and devastating in their violation of trust. My mind screamed in silent agony as I absorbed every detail, the way their hands intertwined, the gentle caress that spoke of forbidden passion, the way Sarah's eyes met hers for just a moment before darting away in shame. In that crushing moment, every illusion I had clung to fell away, leaving only a raw, unfiltered truth that I could no longer deny. The perfect marriage I had believed in was nothing more than a mirage, a delicate facade built on half-truths and deceit. The man in the room, whose identity would soon become another painful secret, was a stranger who had become an integral part of the betrayal that now defined my existence. I turned away slowly, my vision blurred by unshed tears and my heart shattering with each step. I left the room without uttering a word, without giving either of them the satisfaction of seeing my pain. The cold, indifferent hallway swallowed me as I made my escape, each step away from that room a step into an uncertain, painful future. As I drove home later that night, the images of that hotel room haunted me. The weight of betrayal pressed down on me with every mile, and I realized that my life, the life I thought was built on trust, had been irrevocably altered. The journey that had begun with a simple notification on my phone had led me to a truth that was far more complex and devastating than I could have ever imagined. That night, alone in the darkness, I vowed to face the consequences of this revelation head-on. I would gather my strength, confront the shattered pieces of our marriage, and rebuild my life on the foundation of truth, even if that truth cut me deeper than I had ever feared. The path ahead was unclear, and the wounds of betrayal would take time to heal, but I knew that I could no longer live in the confines of ignorance. The key had unlocked a hidden world of deception, and now, I was determined to walk that road, no matter how painful or uncertain it might be. In the quiet hours that followed that fateful night, I found myself adrift in a vortex of raw, overwhelming emotions. The evidence, the relentless pings of an unfamiliar location on my wife's phone, the digital trail that contradicted every word she'd ever spoken, had consumed my every thought. I spent those first days grappling with a mix of disbelief, anger, and an all-consuming sorrow that felt almost physical. Every moment of our shared routine became a painful reminder of the lie I had just uncovered. The perfect life I'd believed in now felt like a fragile construct, and the realization that my wife was not where she said she'd be was a wound that refused to close. I recall waking up one morning with the screen of my phone still burning with the evidence, the location history that pointed unmistakably to places I knew she had no reason to visit. My mind was a haze of questions. Had I been too trusting? Had I ignored the small, almost imperceptible signs that, in retrospect, were screaming at me? The relentless internal debate was punctuated by a heavy silence, as if the world itself had gone mute in response to the betrayal. I spent hours alone, pacing our living room and rewatching the digital logs until the numbers and coordinates blurred into a single, damning truth. It was then that I resolved, I could no longer live in the comforting ignorance of our past, and I had to seek an answer, even if it meant confronting the bitter reality head-on. That resolve led me to a fateful decision. Late one evening, when the world outside was cloaked in darkness and the only sound was the whisper of a cooling breeze, I activated a tracking app on my phone, a tool that I had hesitated to use before, but now saw as my only window into the hidden life my wife, Emily, was leading. I silently monitored her movements over the next few days, cross-referencing every ping with our calendar and our daily plans. I noticed, with mounting dread, that her reported location diverged sharply from her alibi. Instead of being at our office or out running errands as she claimed, she was frequently in upscale parts of town, near hotels and trendy cafes that we'd never mentioned. Each anomaly was a spark that set my heart ablaze with both fury and despair. I remember one particularly gut-wrenching day when the tracking app reported her presence at a chic downtown hotel at an hour when she should have been home. My pulse raced as I followed the trail. With a heavy heart and trembling hands, I made my way to the hotel, an imposing building of glass and steel that seemed to glow under the city lights. Every step I took felt laden with the weight of inevitable confrontation. I parked my car in a secluded lot, ensuring that no one would see me. My mind was a tumult of conflicting emotions. I was enraged by her deception, yet a part of me was desperately clinging to the hope that there might be some explanation, some misunderstanding behind this maze of lies. Entering the lobby, I blended into the subdued crowd of late-night guests. The polished marble floors and soft ambient lighting did nothing to soothe my frayed nerves. Instead, they only amplified the surreal quality of the moment. I discreetly approached the concierge under the pretense of asking for directions, but all I could think about was the room number indicated by the tracking app. With a racing heart, I hurried to the elevator and pressed the button for the floor that housed her supposed location. Each floor that passed felt like a countdown to the moment of truth, the anticipation twisting my gut into knots. When the elevator doors finally opened, I stepped into a hushed corridor and found room 412. My breath caught in my throat as I hesitated at the door, a cocktail of dread and determination flooding my senses. With one final, deep breath, I inserted the key I had found earlier into the lock. The click of the mechanism echoed ominously in the silence, and I pushed the door open with a trembling hand. Inside, the room was dimly lit and meticulously arranged, yet every detail screamed of intimacy: a half-made bed, a pair of designer shoes abandoned by the door, and personal items scattered in a way that suggested recent, hurried departures. I stood frozen in the doorway as my eyes took in the scene. In a shadowed corner, beneath a soft lamp, I saw her, Emily, in an embrace that spoke of secrets and forbidden pleasure. Time slowed to a crawl as I watched, my heart shattering with each passing second. The sight was both surreal and devastating, a quiet confirmation of everything I had feared, laid bare in that hotel room as if it were a stage set for betrayal. I couldn't move, couldn't even breathe properly, as the reality of her deceit overwhelmed me. The room was silent except for the soft murmur of their voices, the gentle rustle of fabric, and the distant hum of the city beyond the window. Every detail was a stark betrayal, and I felt as though the ground beneath me had given way. I stepped back slowly, my vision blurred by unshed tears and the raw intensity of my emotions. Without a word, I turned and fled the room, the door closing behind me with a finality that echoed in my mind. As I drove home that night, the images of the hotel room replayed in my head like a relentless montage. The pain was almost unbearable, each memory a dagger to my heart, each detail a testament to the betrayal that had irrevocably altered my life. I found myself questioning every moment of our past, wondering if I had ever truly known her at all. The car's headlights cut through the darkness, but the shadows in my mind loomed larger than ever. Back at home, I locked myself in the study, the evidence of her infidelity now a burning brand on my soul. I began to sort through every scrap of information I had gathered, the tracking logs, the screenshots, and the internal notes I jotted down during those long, agonizing days. I compiled everything into a digital dossier, a silent archive of betrayal that would serve as both a record of what I had discovered and a testament to the broken trust that had once defined our union. In the quiet of that solitary night, I confronted the harsh truth of my own vulnerability. I wondered how I had been so blinded by love, so wrapped up in the comfortable routine of our life, that I failed to see the small signs of deceit accumulating over time. I realized that I had placed my trust in an ideal, a perfect marriage that, like a fragile vase, could shatter with the slightest misstep. The truth, in its cold and unyielding form, forced me to reckon with my own shortcomings and to question if I had contributed in any way to the erosion of our relationship. With every piece of evidence I reviewed, the duality of my emotions deepened. I felt a burning anger that demanded justice, a fierce need to confront the betrayal head-on. Yet, intermingled with that anger was an overwhelming sorrow, a mourning for the life we had built together, for the shared dreams that now lay in ruins. I wrote endlessly in my journal, pouring out my thoughts in long, unfiltered paragraphs that traced the slow unraveling of a bond one had once believed was unbreakable. I began to plan my next steps with a cold, calculated determination. I knew that I could no longer remain in a state of silent suffering. The evidence was irrefutable, and the path ahead was clear. I had to confront Emily, to force the hidden truths into the light of day, and to demand an explanation for the life she had secretly led. I spent days rehearsing the conversation in my mind, imagining every possible reaction, every tearful admission, and every desperate attempt to justify the betrayal. I wanted the confrontation to be measured, not explosive, a moment when the truth could finally be acknowledged without the chaos of uncontrolled fury. But even as I steeled myself for that inevitable confrontation, I felt an internal conflict that gnawed at me. A part of me, battered by the weight of the evidence, longed for the satisfaction of a swift, decisive reckoning, an immediate outburst that would leave no room for denial. Yet, another part of me recognized that such impulsive reactions would only further erode the remnants of my dignity. I needed to be the one in control, to ensure that the truth was laid bare in all its painful clarity before any rash decisions were made. I reached out to a trusted friend, someone who had known me long before our marriage became a symbol of perfection, and in quiet, private moments, we discussed the unfolding events. His voice was calm, steadying me as I recounted the details of what I had witnessed and the relentless trail that confirmed my worst fears. "You deserve to know the truth," he said simply, "even if it breaks you." His words, though painful, gave me the strength to continue on the path I had chosen. Days turned into a tense waiting game. I maintained a facade of normalcy around our home, yet every interaction with Emily was laced with the silent weight of my discovery. I watched her carefully, every distracted glance at her phone, every nervous laugh, every minute hesitation when she mentioned plans that no longer aligned with our shared schedule. These small, subtle cues were the echoes of a life lived in secrecy, and they haunted me relentlessly. I began to feel that the accumulated evidence was not just a record of her infidelity, but a mirror reflecting my own inability to see the truth. I questioned how deeply we had both been living in an illusion, and whether the comfortable facade of our perfect marriage had blinded me to the growing chasm between us. My journal became a trusted confidant, a place where I could pour out the bitter mix of betrayal and self-doubt. I wrote about every sleepless night, every moment of silent agony as I tried to reconcile the woman I loved with the woman I now saw in those damning messages. And so, with every day that passed, the pressure to confront the truth grew more insistent. I knew that soon I would have to speak, to let the meticulously gathered evidence force a confession. The thought both terrified and empowered me. I envisioned the moment when Emily would finally be forced to confront the life she had hidden from me, a moment when our carefully constructed world would shatter completely, leaving only the stark, raw truth in its wake. As the days edged toward that fateful confrontation, I fortified myself with a determination to reclaim my identity from the ruins of our shattered trust. I made plans for a calm, deliberate conversation, one that would not be driven by impulsive anger but by the necessity of facing a truth that could no longer be denied. I organized my notes, arranged my digital dossier, and rehearsed my words in solitude, all while trying to hold on to a fragile hope that, somehow, the revelation could lead to a new beginning. Now, as I stand at the precipice of that inevitable moment, I feel the full force of the storm inside me, the anger, the sorrow, the haunting loneliness of a love betrayed. Every detail of the hidden life she led is etched into my mind, a constant reminder that the perfect marriage I once believed in was nothing more than a carefully maintained illusion. My heart, though scarred by the unyielding truth, beats with a resolute determination to find a way forward, to confront the betrayal and to forge a new path defined by truth and self-respect. The confrontation looms on the horizon like an unavoidable tempest, a moment when the silent war I have waged in the shadows must come to an end. And as I prepare to face that moment, I know that the journey ahead will be filled with pain and uncertainty. But it is also a journey toward reclaiming my life, toward rediscovering who I truly am in the wake of betrayal, and toward forging a future where trust, though forever altered, can be rebuilt on the solid foundation of hard-earned truth. The day of reckoning finally arrived like the climax of a long, bitter storm. Every minute leading up to it had been a slow, painful build-up of silent dread, a pressure that had mounted until there was no escaping the truth. I awoke before dawn, the sky a raw slate of early morning gray, and felt a chill that was not solely from the autumn air. I knew that today, everything would change. With the evidence I had painstakingly amassed, the location logs, the screenshots of those falsified check-ins, and the covert records of her late-night wanderings, I had reached the point where silence could no longer suffice. In the hours before our planned confrontation, I sat in the dark solitude of our study, rereading my journal entries and letting the weight of every discovered secret wash over me. I remembered the moment I had found the app notification that first set my suspicions ablaze, the cold, unfeeling beep that hinted at a truth I had tried desperately to ignore. Now, that moment was transformed into an unstoppable torrent of memories, each instance when her alibi had faltered, every time her voice had wavered when discussing her whereabouts, every data point that contradicted the version of our life I believed in. It was as if the digital trail of her deception had been carefully mapped out to dismantle the very foundation of our marriage. I spent that morning gathering my thoughts. The evidence lay before me like a damning tapestry of betrayal, and I knew I had to confront her with calm, deliberate resolve rather than an outburst of raw anger. I rehearsed my words over and over, trying to temper the storm of emotions with the need for a controlled confrontation. I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted to achieve. Was it vindication, a shattering of the illusion, or some glimmer of closure that would allow me to move forward? The questions swirled in my mind, each as painful as the last. But deep down, I realized that the truth had to be spoken aloud, no matter how excruciating the process. By mid-afternoon, I had arranged for us to have a quiet dinner at home, a setting that once had been the very symbol of our shared happiness. The dining room was lit softly by the warm glow of a table lamp, its light falling on the neatly set table that looked painfully ordinary now. I had placed a printed folder on the table, a dossier containing all the evidence I'd collected, the location records, the screenshots of her manipulated check-ins, even a few annotated notes where I had documented every small, inconsistent detail. Every piece was a silent testament to the life she had hidden, a life that was unraveling before my eyes. When Vanessa arrived home that evening, she looked tired, her smile forced as if she sensed that something was off. I greeted her with a calmness I wasn't sure I felt. "Vanessa, please sit down," I said quietly, my voice measured but firm. The room was heavy with a tension that I could almost physically touch. As she sat, I placed the dossier in front of her. For a long, agonizing minute, there was only silence. The evidence lay open on the table like an accusation too clear to be refuted. Finally, her eyes fell on a screenshot from a location tracking app showing her at a hotel in the upscale district, a place that I knew she had no legitimate reason to be. Her face, usually so composed, flushed a deep red and then paled further with shock. "What is this, Daniel?" she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and confusion. I took a deep breath and, with as much calm as I could muster, said, "I know you've been lying about your location. I know you've been somewhere else, places you told me you were not. I've been tracking your phone, and every record points to a different life from the one you've been showing me." Her eyes darted back and forth, and for a moment, I thought I saw the spark of denial. But then, the dam broke. With tears welling up, she muttered, "I never wanted you to find out. I was so afraid of losing you, of what everyone would think. I thought I could handle it." The words spilled out haltingly, a torrent of guilt and regret, but they were too little, too late. I listened in silence as she attempted to justify her actions, to explain that it had been a moment of weakness, a misguided attempt to feel something different, something more thrilling than the life we had. But her explanations sounded hollow, rehearsed, and every word only deepened the cavernous pain of betrayal. The conversation that followed was a long, painful unraveling of every shared memory. I asked her how long this had been going on, whether she had ever loved me enough to be honest, and what had driven her to live this double life. Her responses were fractured, interspersed with sobs and desperate apologies. I could see in her eyes the profound sorrow of someone who had hurt the person they once cherished, yet I could not escape the overwhelming sense of loss and humiliation that now defined our lives. The dinner table, once a symbol of togetherness and shared joy, had become a battlefield of unspoken accusations and broken dreams. As the evening wore on, I felt a strange, heavy numbness settle over me, a realization that the person I thought I knew was irrevocably altered, and that our marriage, as I had known it, was gone forever. I recalled the countless small signs I had ignored, the overlooked discrepancies that, in hindsight, screamed of betrayal. Now, faced with the undeniable evidence, I felt as though my entire identity was crumbling, piece by shattered piece. After the confrontation, Vanessa retreated into herself. She became a ghost in our home, barely speaking, her eyes avoiding mine as if the weight of our broken trust was too much to bear. Our once warm living room was now filled with silence, a silence so deep it echoed with all the promises we had made and broken. I spent the following days in a haze of isolation and introspection, trying to reconcile the pain of the betrayal with the lingering love I still felt. I questioned every moment of our past, the laughter we shared, the quiet nights, the whispered confidences, and wondered how I could have been so blind to the signs. Outside, the world moved on as if nothing had changed, but within me, a storm raged. Family members began to sense the fracture in our once unbreakable bond. Whispers at gatherings, sympathetic looks, and the pitiful glances of those who once admired our union cut me deeply. The scandal, though never fully exploded into public view, was enough to taint our shared space with an air of judgment and pity. I felt trapped between the desire to lash out and the need to salvage what little dignity I had left. In the midst of this personal turmoil, I sought refuge in the one place that had always offered me solace, my journal. I poured out every raw, unfiltered thought, documenting not only the evidence of Vanessa's betrayal but also the painful introspection that followed. I wrote about the shock, the anger, and the creeping realization that trust, once shattered, might never be restored to its former brilliance. Each entry was a catharsis, a way of externalizing the pain that threatened to overwhelm me. I wrote until my hands ached and my eyes burned, each word a step toward understanding the man I had become in the wake of such devastation. Slowly, I began to see a glimmer of a different future emerging from the ruins of my past. I attended therapy sessions where I was forced to confront the depths of my grief and anger. My counselor, with gentle persistence, helped me recognize that while the betrayal had altered everything, it did not have to define me entirely. Healing, she said, begins with accepting the truth and then choosing to rebuild from it, brick by brick, day by day. Her words, tender yet unyielding, began to chip away at the walls of my sorrow. I started to take small steps toward reclaiming my life. I reconnected with old friends who had always believed in me, I returned to hobbies I had once loved, and I even began to explore new interests that allowed me to express my raw emotions, like writing poetry and taking long walks in the early morning light. Each day was a battle between the overwhelming urge to wallow in the pain and the quiet, persistent hope that slowly started to surface. I realized that the confrontation with Vanessa, however devastating, was also a turning point, a moment that forced me to confront the truth of who I was and what I needed to move forward. I began to see that while the scars of betrayal might never fully vanish, they could serve as the foundation upon which to rebuild a more resilient, authentic self. I learned that forgiveness was not about absolving her of the hurt, but about freeing myself from the perpetual weight of resentment. In time, I even began to contemplate the possibility of a future where I could learn to trust again, not necessarily the same way as before, but in a manner that honored my newfound strength and wisdom. I explored the idea of rebuilding my life on my own terms, perhaps even finding a love that was rooted in honesty and mutual respect. It was a slow, uncertain process, fraught with setbacks and moments of intense vulnerability, but it was also a path toward reclaiming my dignity. Now, as I sit in the quiet of my study, the soft glow of the morning light filtering through the curtains, I reflect on the journey that has brought me to this point. The pain of that night, of witnessing the betrayal captured on the spy cam and the shattering confrontation that followed, will forever be etched into my memory. Yet, amid the lingering sorrow, I have discovered a strength I never knew I possessed. I have learned that true healing is not about erasing the past, but about integrating it into the tapestry of your life so that, eventually, it becomes a source of wisdom rather than a wound. The road ahead remains uncertain, and the echoes of betrayal will occasionally return like unwelcome ghosts in the quiet hours of the night. But I have also learned that every sunrise brings with it a new opportunity, a chance to build a future defined by truth, resilience, and the courage to forgive. I stand at the threshold of a new beginning, a rebirth forged in the fires of heartache and tempered by the unyielding promise of tomorrow. I have chosen to reclaim my identity, to no longer be defined solely by the betrayal that tore through the fabric of my marriage, but by the quiet determination to rebuild a life that is authentically my own. As I prepare to move forward, I do so with a heart that is scarred but unbowed, a heart that has learned to carry its wounds as symbols of survival rather than tokens of defeat. I will continue to honor the lessons of this painful chapter, using the strength I have gained to guide me through the uncertainties of the future. Though I may never forget the night I discovered the truth, I now understand that the power to redefine my life lies in accepting that truth, no matter how harsh, and using it as the foundation for a more honest, resilient tomorrow. This is my final reckoning, a journey from the depths of betrayal to the slow, painful emergence of a new self. I have come to know that even when everything you once believed in shatters, you have the power to pick up the pieces and build something enduring. With each step forward, I choose to embrace the possibility of redemption, to seek solace in the quiet moments of self-discovery, and to trust, once again, that life, imperfect and unpredictable, can still hold beauty and hope. And so, as the day unfolds with the promise of a fresh start, I step forward into an uncertain future, armed with the lessons of the past and the determination to forge a new path defined by truth and healing. I will carry the scars as reminders of the battles I have fought, and I will let them inspire me to live a life that is richer, more authentic, and ultimately, more free. My journey is far from over, but I now know that even in the darkest moments, the light of a new dawn is always waiting to break through.